Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and yes, I have moved. This is a new backdrop. It's a new house, no longer in the den. Now in one of many locations I'm going to be trying out. Just a backdrop of like cool stuff, I guess, in the background and, you know, whatever. But I like to thank you guys for sticking around in the channel while we did all this stuff, and the dog is running around. He's all excited, and it's mock draft season. It's been mock draft season. It's going to stay mock draft season for another couple of days. And I'm dropping the #1 mock draft, the most accurate mock draft, the one that has no trades because it's going to be a stick and pick draft. You heard it here first. No one is going to trade in the first round. I'm calling it right now only because it was really difficult for me to even think of trades that made sense because there is a logjam of talent there right in the middle outside the top 5. Really guys 6 through 35. Who knows where these guys are going? This is going to be the most exciting, most unpredictable draft in recent memory, and we're going to get started. Let's get it going right now. So here we are. It is 8x8 as per usual. Look at all the fancy colors and look at that top 4 of the draft. How predictable. I know it's kind of chalk at this point, but I think that the draft really does start at number 3, and I do think that my New York Giants are going to take Shedeur Sanders. You know, it just seems like it makes all the sense in the world for them. I don't know if they take Abdul Carter. I would love for them to trade out for a team looking to get Abdul Carter and do sort of like what the Arizona Cardinals did that year with Houston and Detroit, where they traded out of the top 10, then traded back in, got the extra first-round pick in the next season, and then still got a guy that they really wanted in Paris Johnson. I would love for the Giants to trade out of this spot, maybe with Carolina. You know, if you can, Carolina probably wouldn't give you a first-round pick, but maybe the 49ers would at 12. You trade back to 12, and then you trade back up to maybe 6? Kind of like exactly what Arizona did, just to get in front of the New Orleans Saints. And then you still could get Shedeur Sanders, and you get a first-round pick next year, or you don't take Shedeur Sanders, you take Tyler Warren or Tet McMillan, who's you see right there going to the Jets and to Carolina. I really love those guys going to those teams specifically because I think that they're both in need of improving the weaponry around them. Bryce Young, you'll see in my deep dive series coming up. Bryce Young had a great second half of the season for Carolina. He just needs more guys around him. So I think adding Tet McMillan makes a lot of sense, especially in a really deep edge class. For Carolina, who needs edge, you know, it would be a reach here to take an edge player not named Abdul Carter. So short of trading back, take the top wide receiver that's there on the board, the top true wide receiver on the board, and then in the second round, you can make a move for an edge player there, and you'll still get a quality edge player. Maybe you gotta move up a little bit, but I mean, it's a lot better. You get Tet McMillan, and then you can end up getting like a Prince Umanalayan, Landon Jackson, someone like that in the second round. You come out looking pretty good. Same thing with the Jets there. Tyler Warren, a good complement, good control of the middle of the field, and he'll also help out in the run game with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and all that. You know, you want a 3-down tight end, a true top-level tight end. You're basically hoping that you're drafting like a TJ Hawkinson or a George Kittle in this spot where they're going to give you a little bit of everything. You heard a lot about Armand Membu to the Raiders. I didn't necessarily love it, but when there's smoke, there's fire, and if it's not going to be Ashton Genty, it wouldn't shock me if it was Armand Membu with the way the board has fallen. You know, even though DJ Glaze had a great year, I could see the argument of Armand Membu is the most sure thing tackle. You know, Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, are they guards at the next level? Maybe. They're not for sure going to be tackles. You know, they're closer to like a Zach Martin type of a deal there. Josh Simmons, it's too early for him. And then you get into that second wave in the second round. You know, are you going to be taking, you know, Connor Williams to be that guy? I think an argument can be made that you draft Armand Membu, and with Colton Miller's contract up in the air, not extending him as of the making of this video, I could see Membu being drafted as a guy to sort of be the long-term replacement there. Maybe for Colton Miller, you just teach him to play on the left side because Membu did play a lot on the right. Mason Graham to the Jags. I think it's just best player on the board, and they want to just improve that front four. You know, people talk about Travon Walker being a double-digit sack guy. He needs to start winning better. but he is proven to be a good cleanup guy at least, even though he doesn't have a great pass rush win percentage. One of the worst, actually, that I've seen. I think he's like 75th or something in the entire league in terms of pass rush win percentage. So he's doing a lot of the cleanup work for a lot of hard work being done by Josh Allen and Eric Armstead and those guys. So I think you get Mason Graham in there. I think he's going to be a really good, I think long-term replacement for an Eric Armstead who is aging out. And allows Eric Armstead to maybe play a more traditional defensive tackle role. Mason Graham can be part of a great rotation there. I think inevitably he'd be a really great interior defensive lineman in the league. Abdul Carter speaks for himself. Travis Hunter fills two needs for the Cleveland Browns. They need a receiver. They could use a defensive back. And I think that they're a team that would be open to using him in all facets of the game. Cam Ward is locked in at the number 1 pick at this point. So I'm not going to skip over anything here. We're going to talk about Jackson Dart going number 9 here to the New Orleans Saints. They would love to trade down here for a team looking to leapfrog the Bears for either Will Campbell or Ashton Genty. I think those are the two guys that everyone's looking at. The Bears would be the top of their list. So maybe a team like Dallas would want to move up to just maybe get Ashton Genty. They do end up with Jahad Campbell here, which does wonders for their defense anyway. Will Campbell is Arizona interested in Will Campbell? Is a team a little bit lower interested in Ashton Genty who would want to come up? It's a huge commitment the lower you get in this draft, though, to come up for a running back. So you'd have to be one of those teams that feels like you're a running back away, and I'm not sure too many of those teams exist. So the Saints might be stuck here and then having to make sure they get their guy, taking Jackson Dart, and then sort of seeing what happens, I guess. I'm really high on Jackson Dart. I'm just not high on him to play in his first year in the league. I think he's got all the tools in the world. It's just not being in that pro-style offense at Ole Miss. It's going to be a rougher transition for him. And I think if he sits for a year, that would be better for him. But I think that's also why the Saints might feel a little uncomfortable trading too far back, because you don't want to get into that below 20 and 21. Because at 20 and 21, you got Denver and Pittsburgh, who I would say would be looking to maybe trade down perhaps. Pittsburgh might look at Dart at 21, so you don't want to get below them. And you don't want to get below even Denver, because Denver might be looking to trade down. Then you got a team like, Cleveland, who could be coming up for Dart if the Giants take Abdul Carter instead. Maybe you can get Shedeur Sanders, but then what if a team like if Shedeur Sanders is off the board here, you don't want to be in a zone where Cleveland can come up, where the Jets could come up. You don't want one of those quarterback needy teams to maybe leapfrog you for Jackson Dart if he's the guy that you really want. I think you could maybe then go for Jalen Milroe, who could maybe fit the offense better, because Kellen Moore just had Jalen Hurts, and I really like Jalen Milroe to be closer to Jalen Hurts. So that might be a nice, smoother transition for the offense to get something right away out of their rookie quarterback, because it looks like Derek Carr is either going to be too injured to play this year or he's playing somewhere else. It's one of the two things for them. But there's a lot of factors, I think, that come into play for the Saints here. And unfortunately, because of the way they've sort of kicked the can down the road with a lot of their cap situation, they're not really in a great position here. That's why it was so difficult for them to get a head coach. But getting Jackson Dart in the room, you get him in the room and you almost punt the season away. It's kind of crappy, but I mean, they weren't that good this year. They don't really project to be that good this year, even with a more pro-ready quarterback. So it could be a best-case scenario. You get Jackson Dart in the room, let him learn under Kellen Moore for a year, not see the field at all, play Spencer Rattler, play whoever, and then you could be sitting pretty in the top 5 next year. You got a better cap situation, then you can put a team around Dart to actually roll him out the year after. Ashton Genty to the Bears, it just seems like it makes all the sense in the world here if he makes it this far. He becomes the Jahmyr Gibbs of the offense. A little not as good in the receiving game as Gibbs, but certainly a serviceable player. Mix him in there with DeAndre Swift if Swift stays on the team. If not, I could see them drafting a second running back on day 3 to be a better complement for Ashton Genty and just rebuild that backfield. The 49ers getting Will Campbell. They need a solution on the offensive line. He can come in. He can maybe replace Aaron Banks right out the gate, or he plays right tackle. You can try him at both positions, and wherever he ends up being really the best, that's where he can play. Or you play him at guard, anticipate him coming and playing tackle, kind of like what the Cowboys did with Tyron Smith. We talked about Jahad Campbell here. Going to Dallas, sort of the best player on the board here for Dallas in this instance with Ashton Genty off the board. I like the idea of Jahad Campbell coming in, being a 3-down linebacker, blitzing a lot. Especially, having that athleticism with having to deal with Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts and even a Russell Wilson, or and then the running backs like Barkley and Tyrone Tracy, and you got a whole plethora of guys in there that Campbell could really be serviceable to help improve that defense, especially right up the middle. And with his ability to blitz, he played all 3 linebacker positions. I think the versatility will be really good for them. The Dolphins, who very quickly are looking like they might be a bottom 5 team in the league. They're not going to have Jalen Ramsey on the team next year. I think that really locks in either Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron. I think they go Will Johnson, gets him a true outside corner here. His stuff reminds me a lot of Derek Stingley, where Stingley was kind of checked out in his last year in college, just ready to come into the league, and struggled, and people were talking about his draft stock going down. I could see Will Johnson going a lot higher than this, and the NFL sort of not buying into that last season and looking at him the way they looked at Derek Stingley, where he went 3rd overall. I think Will Johnson could have a very similar trajectory to that. Kelvin Banks going to the Colts. Now, this is a guy who can fill in at the guard position, I think, right away and potentially become a long-term tackle. But I think he's just somebody who you can plug in right away, and he'll start, he'll be effective. Sort of the same argument you get with Will Campbell up there with the 49ers. Jahdae Barron to the Cardinals. I think he just completes that secondary. Garrett Williams had a tremendous season. I think Barron, Melton, Williams moving forward as your 3 corners long term will be just amazing for this defense and how they've progressed this year. And Jonathan Gannon just performing really well as a head coach, much better than I expected him to. That's for sure. And here's Mike Green. I skipped over it to get to this here to sort of end this section on Mike Green with going to the Falcons. I feel like the context of what he was quote-unquote accused of, there was a thing in high school where he says it was consensual. She said it wasn't. I don't know. It's hard for me to have an opinion here. This isn't my political channel. And then the second time around, it wasn't even an assault thing. It was like some mix-up with having, agreeing to sort of stay away from each other, and then they ended up in the same place somehow, and nothing actually really happened. It was just a violation of that, and there was like a zero tolerance rule or something at that school, and then that's how he ended up at Marshall. But the talent is undeniable, and I think Atlanta, who's just really looking to make things work, I think could take a chance on him. I think this is really the first place he could legitimately go. This is sort of his ceiling, and I think that drafting him at his ceiling isn't the worst idea. I don't necessarily... He's been clean since that instance of we weren't supposed to be around each other. We were oopsie daisy, and the school had a very, very strict policy, a zero tolerance policy for any of that stuff, regardless of whose side of the story was. So I think that might be coming down a little unfair on him. I'll leave it at that. And Atlanta needs the edge help. They invested a lot in the front 4 in the last draft. I think this will sort of wrap that up for them, and they can get back to looking maybe into the secondary a bit on day 2. Then the Cincinnati Bengals, they go with Shamar Stewart, the edge from Texas A&M. I thought about it being Gray Zabel, who goes next to Seattle, but with Trey Hendrickson probably gone anyway, they've already had a need at defensive end. Why not take Shamar Stewart? He's a great power rusher. And I think you can, with good coaching, can get him some more pass rush moves. And he can be really effective for your defense. They need to improve that defense drastically. Now, I know that the draft isn't the best way to immediately improve a position group or a side of the football, unless you're dropping in like a blue chip quarterback or a blue chip running back. The drasticness of how they can improve your team is not significant. You know, you improve if you want to improve a side of the ball overnight, you do that in free agency with veteran players who you sort of know what their floor is. You know, it's harder on the defense, but I think the potential of Shamar Stewart is really high. Then you get to Gray Zabel. I think Seattle needs an interior offensive lineman, so Zabel can come in. And then if things with Abraham Lucas don't really work out, maybe you can kick him to tackle. I think they'll invest multiple times on the offensive line in this draft anyway to sort of anticipate that happening. You know, you just put a lot of money into Sam Darnold, so you're going to want that to work out. I could also see them potentially being a team if Ted McMillan does fall, them being a trade partner with a team like New Orleans to come up, and then New Orleans could be sitting here, and then maybe that's when they can take Jackson Dart. I think that's a possibility as well. I would watch out for that in the event that Ted McMillan does fall out of that top 8. Jalen Walker to Tampa. I think you can play him as off-ball linebacker and blitz him. You can play him as a traditional edge. I think that really fits what Tampa Bay needs in their linebacker group and in their edge group. You know, Yaya Diaby has improved every year. Chris Braswell is there as a second-round pick last year. You look for him to improve as a rotational player on that front four. Logan Hall, you know, there. And, oh, the dog is excited. He must be a Tampa Bay fan. I know, buddy. And then we got the Denver Broncos taking Omari and Hampton. It just makes sense for them. You know, Sean Payton loves to have these versatile 3-down running backs. He can come in and be their Alvin Kamara. I really believe that he can come in and be that and help really round out that offense. And then they can go back to focusing on the defense, which was really great last year, but could still use a couple of pieces. Pittsburgh with Malachi Starks. He plays next to Minka Fitzpatrick and come up, play some slot work for you. Just an overall improving of the secondary for a defense in general that is very well-rounded. I think this is like a finishing piece for that defense as they figure out what's going on offensively for them. Colston Loveland rejoining his college coach in Michigan. Sort of the same thing with Malachi Starks, but on the flip side for the Chargers on the offensive side of the ball. This sort of completes what they want to do as an offense, you know, run the ball really effectively and then control the middle of the field in particular with some talented guys there on the outside. Green Bay, speaking of talented guys on the outside, Matthew Golden coming here to the Packers. He takes a bit of a tumble, and I think that's why Green Bay is comfortable jumping on him. I think Jaden Higgins will be really high on their list too. I think he could be a sneaky pick here at 23. But taking Golden for his speed to sort of make up for what they're apparently going to lose in Christian Watson. Don't know if he's going to be coming back, and Romeo Doubs is another player. Their wide receiver room outside of Jaden Reed was looking promising and young, and then injuries have sort of really killed off the potential of that. And then you got Minnesota, who they will definitely be looking to trade out of this spot. But if they do have to hold, which unless there's someone's coming up here in this scenario for Jalen Milroe, like Cleveland perhaps, they stick and pick, and it's Nick Imanwari from South Carolina. They got an aging Harrison Smith back there, so putting him as the heir apparent in the safety room at the safety position be very effective. And Brian Flores loves using multiple different looks, multiple different sets, and being able to play Harrison Smith maybe a little closer to the line of scrimmage while Nick Imanwari plays that deep third. Could add another dimension to the defense in Minnesota. And getting in here to the home stretch, it is Houston taking Josh Simmons. It's pretty much a must at this point. They did sign Cam Robinson, but that's not a long-term answer for them. Josh Simmons, the injury concerns are what drops him in this draft, but I do love him as a prospect. If he can get healthy, stay healthy, they might have stolen potentially the best true tackle in the draft here in Josh Simmons. Then we got Siobhan Revell going to the Rams. This was a tough pick to make. It really was a tough pick. I thought about Josh Connerly here, but thinking of the secondary, they're going to want to keep up defensively. I think they're planning on scoring a lot of points with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, with Matthew Stafford and Kyron Williams and Blake Corum and Tyler Higbee and all those guys. So I think they're going to want to anticipate a team having to come back and throw the ball against them. I think Siobhan Revell, sort of the same concerns you have with Josh Simmons, but from an overall talent level, if they're healthy, you've gotten a steal in this draft picking them this late in the first round. Detroit goes Tyler Booker, not a sexy pick, but a good long-term answer there with Graham Glasgow on his way out. You lost Kevin Zeitler. Christian Mahogany is a question mark. I think Christian Mahogany can be really good, but he is a question mark. But even if he does work out, Graham Glasgow is like a million years old. So having Tyler Booker there as sort of a third interior offensive lineman this year, and then stepping in as a starter next year, kind of like what they did with Christian Mahogany last year when they had Zeitler and Glasgow. Now they got Mahogany and Glasgow. Booker can be there. Plug him in. And if he outplays Graham Glasgow, or if Frank Ragnow gets hurt, Glasgow can go to center. Booker plugs in. It puts them in a much better position to keep that offense functioning the way that they like it. And the way that they like it involves having to have a healthy and effective offensive line. Baltimore, another tough team to pick for. They seem so complete. And when you're a complete team, you just go for value, I feel, at that point. And there's, tackles seem to be kind of off the board. So you go with the highest guy on your board. I think Michael Williams would fall into that. He comes in, he's at least an early down guy to start out as he develops pass rush. But he was very effective and graded out really well as a run defender. So you at least get that into your rotation going up against teams like Cleveland, who's probably going to be focused on running the ball, even though you don't know who the running back is. You don't know who their quarterback is either. It's Joe Flacco. So what's that going to look like? Then you got Pittsburgh, who's always going to love running the ball. So it helps to have, and then you have a team like Cincinnati, who you're going to want to have fresh legs to rush the passer. So having Michael Williams in those true running situations could help keep your better edge rushers, your better pass rushers, fresher for those situations in those games as well. Donovan Ezeraku going to Washington. Before getting Laramie Tunsil, I think this was a slam dunk Josh Connerly spot, but now you got Tunsil. Do they look at the interior offensive line here with Sam Cosmi missing most likely the entire season? I don't. It's tough to say. I think maybe in the second round they could look into that more effectively and get more value out of that, because I think as you get into that second grouping, which you would be at this point, of interior offensive linemen, once you get past Zabel and Booker and then sort of the hybrids of Campbell and Kelvin Banks, you get into Donovan Jackson and Big Jonah and Marcus Bowe and those types of players. So that looks a lot better in the 50s, than it does in the first round. And I think it'll just improve the overall value of their draft class by going Ezeraku here, which could be a little bit of a reach. I've seen people put him as high as 15 to Atlanta. So he's got a very large range of floor and ceiling apparently in this draft, at least among mock drafters. So I'd say this is fair value based upon that range that I've seen. And they're not a team that particularly, shockingly, doesn't have a lot of needs. Like, it just sort of happened overnight. They did so well in the draft. It's amazing what a good quarterback can do for you, especially because Daniels did sort of, he sort of valleyed out there in the middle of the season, but then he picked it right back up at the end and into the playoffs. So it's really promising there, and I'm saying that as a Giants fan, which kind of makes me sick to my stomach. And then, could have been a wide receiver like Ibuka or Burden, but they did go get Deebo Samuel. They have Luke McCaffrey there. So I don't know if they might still go wide receiver here, because maybe they find Ibuka and Burden are too good of a value. Maybe Jaden Higgins is too good of a value here for them. But I think Ezeraku is still a good value pick and an important one for that team and what Dan Quinn wants to do on the defense side of the ball. They don't really have a true edge rusher on that defense. So Izaraku can come in and almost immediately be the best edge rusher on the team. Unless they've signed someone that I forgot about off the streets, no one comes to mind immediately. Then we get 2 interior defensive linemen back-to-back, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan. Again, another 2 guys that they could go much higher than this. It's so strange. When you look at this page, you got Booker, who could go way higher than this. Michael Williams and Izaraku could go way higher than this. Grant and Nolan could all, like the last 5 picks here from 27 to 31, they could all be top 20 picks. And I don't think that anyone would be overly shocked at that. I've seen Walter Nolan projected as high as 11 to the 49ers. Kenneth Grant as high as 17 to Cincinnati Bengals. So this is going to be such a fun draft, man. It's going to be so fun to see this happen. Kenneth Grant comes in, he immediately plays next to Ed Oliver, and he's a great 3-down option for you. Walter Nolan, same thing. And finally, a true great compliment for Chris Jones. I think they would jump at this, despite their offensive line lack of depth, we'll call it, on their offensive line that they have, especially now that they've lost Joe Thuney in free agency. Into the trade to the Bears. And then Nick Scorton to the Eagles, just replenishing their edge room, I guess. Josh Sweat is gone, and Brandon Graham is retired. You have Nolan Smith and Bryce Huff, but adding another guy into that group, they're a team that their defense has functioned really well when they've had a deep rotation amongst that front 4 in particular, both edge and interior. They seem to have hit home runs there in the secondary. I think if Nick Emanwari is there at 32, he could be an option for them. With Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gone, I think that could be a real possibility. But he isn't there in that situation, so they just go, again, value. Sort of like the same argument for Baltimore. You go with value, and you take the best edge player on the board there. I do think Scorton and Connerly are in the same area, but I don't know if they go Connerly just because he would definitely be on the bench all year. I could see them making the argument that they're drafting Lane Johnson's replacement because he can't play forever. But, I also, if they think Connerly can play guard, maybe that's a thing, and then he competes with Tyler Steen for his first year or 2 before kicking out the tackle permanently as Lane Johnson's replacement. I think that argument can be made. But I think Scorton is the most instant impact guy that they could pick up. And I think that they are ready to run it back because they have so much talent on that team. But there's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to get thrown around in the coming years as these young players that are on these cheap rookie deals, still a lot of them. As those contracts come up, you're going to have to pay these guys. Jalen Carter, for sure. Cooper DeJean is going to have to get paid in a couple of years. Quinyon Mitchell, you got a first-round pick on him, so you got 4 years of that. But, they've done a great job of effectively drafting for the future and preparing for that future. So I think Scorton is just another piece of that puzzle to help them continuously be ready for these key position groups that they've put together that have made them such an effective contender for most of the time that Sirianni has been there. Even going back into some of those Doug Peterson years where, they got sort of thrown off by an injury that sort of screwed their season up, like the year they took Carter 2 years ago. But overall, I think this is just how they operate. This is just how the Eagles front office operates in drafts. And it won't be an interior guy. I see interior game thrown around a lot with Carter and Davis and Ojamo. That's still a really effective 3-man rush. They had a 4-man interior defensive line rotation last year that was super effective. Milton Williams is gone. You still have it. You don't need to take a premium draft pick here to replace that. I think you can look for more of a traditional run stuffer in the later rounds, maybe like a Deion Walker, who's like this giant body who comes in as a great pass rusher right away, but he has such the size that you can coach up his ability in the run game. He can be a super effective nose tackle rotation guy with Jordan Davis. for a couple of years before you decide if you're keeping Davis or not. And there you have it, all 32 teams. All 32. They all kept the first round pick. First time in forever. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to get moved around. I'm sure it's not going to be perfect, but I'm as perfect as they come, and you guys will see that come Thursday, April the 24th and 25th, when all the things that you just saw in this video all come true. And I appreciate you guys sticking around, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming deep dive series. All 32 teams been working hard at it. You saw a post there if you go to my community section, and you'll see what I kind of have previewed as to how I feel about certain players. And we're going to rank every single team once the draft sort of settles out in real life. And then we'll get right started, hopefully in the middle of May. Stick around. I'll see you guys enjoy the draft.